So welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Brianna. I'll be the host for this session. We're going to be talking about parents of LGBTQ youth. And I've been with KYC for about 2 years, and I've been a part of all of the amazing work that we've done in the community to support our LGBTQ plus family. So this session is intended to run from 10:40 to 11:25, and all participants' mics should be muted, and everyone should be able to access the chat box as well. Some people's videos are on the screen, so if you don't want your video to be shown, you can just click the video button, and then your video can disappear from the session. Feel free to write all of your questions in the chat box. We'll be looking through those as we go along. And if you prefer to speak your questions aloud, you can raise your hand with the little virtual emoji, and we'll be sure to open up the floor for your thoughts when you raise your hand. So we have a few presenters for today. Our first presenter, Shireen, is the division director of KYC's community collaboration team, and was kind of like the mastermind behind the opening and initial operation of our LGBTQ plus center. She has many years of experience working with the community and is an advocate for justice, equality, and also kind of coined the term "nothing about us without us." So she makes sure to provide an inclusive environment for our team. And we have a very diverse team, and we have a lot of connections to the community, and we have a great passion for the things that we do at KYC. Our co-presenters, Carolyn and Bob Penta, along with their bisexual daughter, Molly, are the co-founders of the Penta Pride Project, a nonprofit based in Buffalo Grove. And the Penta Pride Project and the Buffalo Grove Pride serve to highlight, celebrate, and normalize the LGBTQ plus community in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. The organization holds monthly events from drag queen story hours to queer proms and coming out day celebrations, but they're best known for throwing the Buffalo Grove's first Pride Parade back in June of 2019 that drew a crowd of more than 6,000 people. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Shireen, Carolyn, and Bob Penta.
Great. Well, good morning, Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. You're good.
So again, we're excited for this great collaboration, and hopefully this is going to be helpful to you all. I'm not sure how many participants we have that are parents or are actually family members who are LGBTQ, but we centered this presentation discussion around helping family members. Participants in this workshop, you're going to learn how to address some of, we picked 7 frequently asked questions by parents of LGBTQ plus youth. We're also going to learn about the role of family acceptance and health and well-being of LGBTQ youth. And then also you're going to learn some resources for families with LGBTQ youth. We know that there are a ton of resources out there, but we wanted to center it specifically around family members on what you can access on how to be supported. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first question. So here's a question. How will I know if my child is part of the LGBTQ community? Bob and Carolyn, you want to take that one?
Sure. To be honest, you won't until your kid comes forward. Now, you might have inklings, but the key is to make it okay if and when they decide to come out to you. We made it, like when we might have gotten an idea that Molly had her first crush on a girl, we made it very clear that we would be okay with it. And what I mean by we made it very clear is any time that someone in the LGBTQ community was in a TV show, we would pause and mention how cool that is. And hey, look, isn't that neat that hey, look at this commercial. That was 2 women in that Jared commercial or whatever. Or in Billions, there's someone that's agender. And we would always make sure that we made it obvious that if and when Molly felt comfortable coming out, we were here for her and it would be totally accepted. So I don't know if I answered this question exactly. How will you know if they're part of the community? But you won't until they come to you.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way of answering. And also, hopefully, if people watch the pre-video where we talked about, LGBTQ 101, you can go back and look at that. There is a difference between orientation and identity expression. And just natural sexual attraction, that doesn't typically happen until, a child is, like say 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 older. But in terms of gender identity expression, that happens earlier. And so you might have a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old or 5-year-old telling you that, no, I am not a boy, I am a girl. So that's something you might hear earlier on, as opposed to finding out who they're attracted to, because they're not thinking about being attracted to anyone at 3 or 4 or 5 years old, but they may very well know and be able to express what their gender or genders are early on.
And I was specifically speaking to attraction, because that's what we have experiencing.
Right. That's why I wanted to point that out, is that attraction may come later, gender that might be earlier, you don't know. But again, let the child lead you in that discussion, which I think we're going to address that with another question later. So thank you. Next one. My child has not come out to me, kind of goes along the same way, but I know Jimmy, I shouldn't say that, is gay or transgender.
Should I say something? It kind of refers back to what I had said earlier. Don't out your kid. Let them come to you, but make it obvious that you would be okay if they do decide to come to you with that information. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that has been very repeatedly stated to teachers in to my friends that are teachers, is do not out a student, do not out your kid, let them come to you.
And you'll be surprised too, even if you happen to have a household that is very open about these sorts of things, like we always have. My husband's brother is gay. My daughter had attended his wedding and even been a part of it. She knew that being gay was not only normal, but very celebrated in our family.
Yeah, I performed their ceremony.
She still was very nervous about actually saying the words out loud to us, even though she knew there was no way we would do anything but celebrate her.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do not want to out them. Let them come to you.
And what are some ways that parents might out their kids? Like, what does that mean for people who may not be familiar with that term?
One would be just flat out ask them, hey, are you gay? Yeah, don't do that. That would be bad. Or I guess that would be the most obvious of what it means to out, is to vocalize their identity without them being the first one to share it, I think. So all of this is acquired knowledge. It is a perpetual learning experience. I in no way know all of the vocabulary, because it is perpetually changing and being more inclusive and better representative of everybody. But be open to learning is another huge part of parenting in everything, not just being part of the LGBTQ community.
I don't know who this beautiful person is who's clapping and snapping.
That's our daughter's best friend.
Oh, I'm like, you've got a cheer right here.
This is good. We can actually see Andy in the screen, and we can tell he agrees that we're doing okay.
Okay, I haven't said anything wrong yet.
I'm gonna jump out there. Andy, do you want to add anything you want to add to this?
I was actually, I have questions for a future Zoom call that I'm supposed to answer, and I was actually answering it with exactly what Bob is saying. I'm like, be open to learning new terms and identities because they're constantly changing. And I was like, yes, Bob, you're doing great.
I was in the middle of talking to a group of people with Andy and Molly, and I misdefined what bi was. and Andy corrected me in it, and I was like, oh, all right. Did everybody see that? I got corrected, and I'm just fine with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so be okay with being wrong as long as you're okay with learning as you go.
That's awesome. Be okay with learning. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Of course.
Andy, stay tuned. What are your pronouns, by the way?
He, him.
He, him. Thank you. Okay. So this is a question that parents may ask, and you know, and I know my mother had this question, you know, how do I tell my parents or my siblings or my friends about my child once I know? You know, how is this something that you all navigated this as parents once Molly did share with you what her orientation was?
So again, this would get to outing them. So be very careful with who you tell, because it's actually not your story to tell. When Molly came out to me, I talked to my mom about it just to kind of make it known. So when Molly comes out, my mom didn't react in some way that would make Molly self-conscious. But I made it very clear to my mom, do not talk to Molly about this until Molly comes to you about it. So you have to make sure that if you are talking to your family because you need help and need to talk through with someone, make sure it's very obvious that it's not okay for them to talk to your kid about their sexuality or identity until they come to you about it. But it is your kid's story to tell to come out to their family.
That's a good point. And that's another question that later we'll go to. Actually, that's the very next one. What do I do with my feelings? Because you made a really good point about, basically, on one hand, you said story to tell, don't out your kid, but then you just said, but I did tell my mom because I wanted her, you know, blah, blah, blah. But it sounded like you yourself needed someone for you to talk to and sort of, you know, talk through things, yeah. Right? I mean, am I hearing? It sounds like you picked someone who in your mind was your safe person that you could have the conversation with.
Very much so. There are local organizations, which will come up later in the presentation, but there are groups that a parent can go to talk to other parents who might be going through the same thing. And it might not be where you're not okay with it, but you want to know, what can I do to help and support? And those organizations are wonderful. One of them is PFLAG, which will come up later in the presentation. But what do you do with your feelings? Those are valid feelings also. You can find communities to discuss your feelings also.
Hi, you all. We actually have a question from the audience. Someone asks, what do you say when a family or friend asks you if they are LGBTQ+?
There were several pronouns in there about who's the they that is coming to you.
I think your child. Like if a family member asks if your child is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's say my sister thinks that my daughter is part of the community. So if I'm hearing you right, my sister asks me, hey, is Molly gay or whatever?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I would say that's not my story to tell. If Molly is and she feels comfortable coming to you, she will. At this point, always assume that, or don't assume an identity or a attraction until it presents itself. That's kind of what I would tell one of my family members that asked me but didn't ask Molly directly. Mm-hmm. Andy has a response?
Yes, go right ahead.
I would personally want the family member to just ask me how I identified. So you could just be like, you should ask them how they identify instead of coming to me.
Which is difficult because asking them directly does kind of out them. So it's a fine line between outing and being curious and supportive.
Yeah. And I just want to add something that's a little bit off topic, but gets at this. That's why it's so important that we as a society become more and more open to who people are and their comfort level talking about it. Because the younger we can talk to kids and assure them that it's okay to be who they are, they can present these things earlier and be comfortable themselves. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. So part of the Pinta Pride Project is to make this all just normal. So your kid brings home somebody and introduces them. And if you can see that this new person treats your kid well, make them a sandwich. Just don't even make a thing out of it. Like, hey, great, you guys seem good together. I don't care what's going on. Are you hungry? And so the more deflated you can make the situation, the easier it is for everybody.
When I asked my mother, I said, when I asked her how did she feel like she needed to mourn when I came out, etc., mourn, her ideas or whatever. And she said, no, it wasn't that. It was just a shifting of my ideas. Like, I didn't see it as a mourning. I wasn't sad. And I was, imposing on her what I had heard other parents say about, like, oh, I have to mourn the fact that this is what this means. Now, mind you, I had been married to a man. I had given birth to children. I even adopted children as well. So I felt like I had already done my duty,
Uh-huh.
It's like, look. So, and I mean that jokingly. I really don't think that women need to do that as a duty. That's just my answer to people to say, gays are ruining the world, But anyway, it just doesn't. Sorry, I lost my thought all of a sudden. Dogs that walk outside the window that I get distracted by.
No, you were talking about your mom and how.
Basically, she said, no, I was imposing on her what I had heard other parents in the community say, that they had to mourn, that, well, now my kid, I won't get to walk him or her down the aisle, or we won't have this type of wedding, all stuff that is totally not true. Or I won't have a biological grandchild. It's like, would you actually say that to someone who had been adopted? It's just things that can be highly offensive and hurtful. I won't even call them microaggressions because they're just absolute slashes.
Yeah.
But I will say to the audience, to those who are participating, Carol and I are planning on continuing this conversation in the future for parents as a way for them to connect and find support with one another. So I'll for the sake of time, I'll move on to the next question. But we are here for you, Penta Pride and the LGBTQ Center at Kenneth Young Center. We are planning to offer this space via Zoom and eventually in person for people to have these type of conversations. So here's another good one. Could it just be a phase? How can my child know that he, she, or they, if they're part of the LGBTQ community? They're so young. For this one, I would recommend people looking at developmental stages of youth. Look at, what are some things, like even thinking about your own self. I recall my very first crush. I probably was 5 on the school bus, and my sister had this friend, my sister who's 7 years older than me. She had this friend, and I just remember how my heart used to flutter. When her friend would get on the bus.
Oh, so cute.
Oh my. I just totally remember that. I remember that is the very first crush that I had. I didn't even remember the girl's name, but yes, I remember that. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I just knew. And if you just think back to your very first crush, how old were you when you first, would get excited or get butterflies in your stomach or whatever, or when you felt a certain way about your gender or about your orientation? That's a clue. But then also, again, just look at developmental information.
And how horrible would you have felt when you were 7 or 8 years old and you see somebody and somebody tells you that that's just a phase?
Yeah. I think that can be a painful thing to say to a kid.
It's horrible.
It's just a phase.
So whether it is or not,
even
if it possibly is, you do not tell them that it's a phase. You treat it as their valid feelings at that time. And if it evolves into something new, you then treat their new feelings as valid and true. Molly came out as lesbian, and great, that's what it was. And then a couple months later, I think, or a year later, sometime later, she probably had a crush on a boy and then had to come out again as bi. And if that, again, we go back to, if this was just you love who you love and you're attracted to who you're attracted to, our daughter wouldn't have had to come out twice. Like, she almost felt guilty that now she
was
had
very worked up about
also had a crush on a boy, and that was horrible. She was really upset by it. Yeah. So assume it's not a phase, because it's who they are at that time.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure to put on people too. Because I mean, honestly, the same here. It's like I was, again, like I mentioned, I was married to a man. Then I came out as lesbian, in a relationship with a woman, and then realized, no, I mean, I do have an attraction to men. Don't want to be in a relationship with a man. But so that means, I am not. That means I'm not romantic. But anyway, but yeah, our community, the LGBTQ community we ourselves can put a lot of pressure and a lot of, well, this is what this means, and this is what, there could be a lot of pressure there. But going back to the, if you tell the person in the face, don't tell my ex-husband or my current wife, but I honestly think when I was 5 years old, that woman was my soulmate. At 5, I would have told you if I knew the term. So let's go to the next one.
Shireen, we also have another question from the audience. Do you want to do it now?
You'll have to read it again because we can't see it.
No problem. It says, how do you support a friend or family member who is afraid to come out to their parents due to cultural or religious reasons?
Whew. Yeah, that's a really good one. So I think, again, just being there for that person, not doing the work for them, but allowing them to, listening, hearing them. Again, it's not, as Bob said earlier, it's not your story to tell. It's not, you can really feel empathetic for them. But again, know that you don't know what cultural, familial, financial, results could happen from them coming out to their family.
Yeah, if they pay your bills and they are your house, and without them, you could be on the street, it might be unsafe to come out to them. And that's a horrible truth, but it's a truth that might be there. That is part of the reason that we try to create and support as many gay straight alliances. What's the new name for them?
Gender and
sexuality alliances.
Yeah.
So that if someone doesn't get support at home, there is a place that they can go in their school to get support. So a GSA is, in case anybody doesn't know, is often a club that meets after school for LGBTQ students to go and feel supported and loved, especially if they don't get it in their own home.
And at our center, we're putting together our own what would be a GSA, our Youth Advisory Council, because we also know that LGBTQ students are more often than not pushed out of schools, don't feel welcome, or just not interested in joining their GSA at their school because they're not comfortable coming out at school. So we are doing a community-based GSA for those individuals. And also we have programs working with homeless youth experiencing homelessness, because we also know that approximately, and it's a little bit more than that, 40% of youth who are experiencing homelessness identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. So, and LGBTQ youth of color in particular are disproportionately experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. So you're right. A lot of it has to do with, and some parents will say, well, I can deal with the gay or lesbian thing, but this transgender thing, no. So it might be a safety issue. So I think the best way to support that friend is to ask that friend, what can I do for you? What do you need me to do? Or, and sometimes it's just listen and let them process information. Sometimes we feel like we have to fix things, or we have to do something, or we have to be that ally that is, taking action. And sometimes the best ally you can be is to sit and listen and hold the person's hand, or not. Can't do that 6 feet away. You know what I mean? Be there.
You just posted in the chat about support groups. That's actually a couple slides later. So
yes, all that's coming.
So should I take my child to therapy?
I really want to address this.
Yeah. So you should take your kid to therapy if they need therapy. You do not take them to therapy because they're gay or because they're trans. You take them to therapy if you feel they aren't happy or content or dealing with stress, the same way you would take them to therapy for any other reason. You don't take your kid to therapy because they're in 4 AP classes. You take them to therapy if the stress of 4 AP classes is making them unhealthy. So, that would be my response to, should I take my kid to therapy if they need therapy?
And I would say, does the kid want to go to therapy? Because again, it's very, there's no agency there. The child does not have agency if you're thinking, I have to take my child. Let's put the agency on the individual. Does the individual want therapy? Honestly, I think everybody needs therapy. Everyone should go to therapy. I'm just saying. So, yeah.
Something. I would just add to that too, that sometimes some of the groups that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, ways for LGBTQ teens to connect with each other, are not therapy groups, but they are therapeutic groups, because everybody needs a place to go where they belong, and especially marginalized youth who are in these groups that are not as prevalent as straight people. They need a place to connect that is therapeutic for their soul, to find others like them. I would add.
I love this picture of the individual in the middle. That shirt says trans person, because I want to point out too that a lot of times the disparities that we in the LGBTQ community, a lot of the social issues that we may have, or substance use issues, or medical or health or mental health issues, is not because we are LGBTQ. It's because the way society is set up, and the way that through rejection, through lack of support, etc. It's more about that than it is about the fact of who we are attracted to, or how we identify in terms of our gender, or not identify in terms of genders.
Great.
So, where can I go to get more answers and information? And I purposely selected a same-sex couple for this part, because I have friends who are same-sex couples who are like, oh my God, my kid just came out, what do I do? And, naturally you would go, really? But, all parents are like, okay, we all want our kids to be healthy. We all want them to be happy. We all want them to be well-adjusted. And we want the world to love them, right?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, so where can we go for more answers and information?
The first one that I would go to is there's a group, PFLAG. And I always forget what it's.
I know it was Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. But Shireen, do you know has it evolved into a different name?
I don't know.
That's still what they're using.
So let's go with that for now. So PFLAG, they're a group, and they have local chapters that meet. pflag.org. And they meet and they discuss and they socialize, and that would be the first place that I would go if I did not have a group that I already knew was okay and would help me out.
And we've actually been to a few PFLAG meetings, and they have a wide variety of people. And what I mean by that, in terms of people that were immediately accepting of the new identity, and people that are having trouble reconciling it for whatever reason, religious reasons, whatever it may be. And that support group is happy to help anybody with those issues. So they're terrific.
There's also a group in the area, it's called PTI, Parents of Transgender Individuals. That's another group, and intentionally they're private because it's, they want to protect the families. But if you reach out to me, Shireen P at kennethyoung.org, I can connect you with the PTI group. I didn't put that on there on the list later, but if you email me, I can connect you with that group as well. And as Carolyn mentioned, same thing with the they're therapeutic, but not therapy or clinical. We have a lot of programs and connections for families and individuals that are therapeutic, but it's not therapy or clinical in nature. It's just there to support you. And at the end, we have a list of resources as well.
Definitely. I know also another one besides Kenneth Young Center is Youth Outlook is a great center. And actually, this whole thing with COVID has been horrible, but I guess if there's a silver lining, you can join their virtual sessions and your virtual sessions at Kenneth Young Center, from anywhere. So if you would have been, if you're too far away from Schaumburg, but now you can be close to Schaumburg on Zoom. So all of these places, Youth Outlook has different groups all over the state of Illinois. That would be a great one.
Yes. All right.
There's another one, yeah.
What are some ways that families can demonstrate support? And while people are typing this in the chat box, I'm going to call on Andy. Do you have any ideas? If Brianna can unmute Andy, if you have ideas on how families might be able to support their LGBTQ youth, and if there are any other youth or young people in the group, please make yourself known so Brianna can have you all speak as well. Because again, like Brianna mentioned, I'm all about nothing about us without us, which I did borrow from the recovery community, or the substance use treatment community.
So what are some ways that families can demonstrate support? Like Bob and Carolyn said, just make it obvious that if their kid were to come out, make it obvious that being gay or part of the LGBT community, it's okay to be gay or any identity, and that it's just very widely accepted in your household. And they can go to all of these websites listed here for support and learn different ways to be accepting and be open-minded about learning different identities. And you can always do research about a bunch of different history and just learning the different identities so that you don't offend anyone or anything about their identities. That's a really good way to just make the LGBTQ people around you more comfortable so that you don't accidentally offend them or anything.
Thanks, Andy. We also have a question from the audience that says, do you know if there is any disparity in resources for LGBTQ plus youth and families based on insurance coverage, such as Medicaid or private insurance?
I wouldn't have a lot of answers about insurance. Shireen, you might, but all of these groups that we're talking about are free. You can go to the Kenneth Young Center. You can go to Youth Outlook. You can come to Pinta Pride Project events. We don't charge anything. I suppose it would be the same as going to see a doctor or going to see a therapist, whatever your insurance would be.
Right. I would say a lot of programs that we offer at the LGBTQ Center here are funded through various grants that we have either from the federal government or the state of Illinois through the Illinois Department of Human Services or through Schaumburg Township or Hanover Township. So we try to make sure, you know, again, we're serving a community that is, you might come from a family where the family might have resources, but the individual may not be out to their family, and therefore they may not be able to lay down that insurance card, because then the parent or guardian would know what services they're accessing. So, and on top of that, I will say a lot of the services that we provide, we intentionally make sure that we're providing services that are open and inclusive, that will allow us to openly serve LGBTQ youth. And, you know, for example, there was a teen pregnancy prevention and sexually transmitted infection opportunity that was out there, but the way it talked about sex being within marriage and how marriage was defined, that's just not something that, you know, funding that I would not want to take, I would not accept. You know, we want to make sure that the services are, as much as we can, offer free services to the community. And so right now, all of the services that we offer, they are free, which is great. We do a lot of capacity building for communities for our partners. We do trainings in schools. We also do trainings in the community setting for those who are not enrolled in schools. So I do recognize that the disparity that I can think of is the fact that there are some individuals, some youth, who do not want their parents to know that they're trying to get support and access to services. And so we can help you with that. There's a Know Your Rights session that's going on right now, but youth age 12 and older can also access services without consent from their parents. And so we have that in our teen resource guide that we put together through a couple of our projects. And so again, we can also have that. If you go to our website, the Kenneth Young Center's website or CPYD Coalition's website for resource guide, you can find information in our teen resource guide on how to access services for free.
And we have some responses from the prompt. What are some ways family can demonstrate support? So some people said taking your kids and family members to the Pride Parade every year, listening and having open discussions, discussing safe sex practices for male and female partners, since health classes are based on practices for heteronormative populations, which you kind of mentioned, Shireen. A lot of great literature for young children, and our public school teachers protected to have age-appropriate conversations and early discussions in their classroom. And this person said maybe this was covered in a different session that I did not attend. Do you all have any information about the public school teachers' age-appropriate conversations in the classroom regarding this?
I teach math.
Actually, Brianna teaches. I know she's our moderator, but Brianna actually is the coordinator for our teen pregnancy and STI program within our division. So if you follow up with us, Brianna could, provide that information. So we can, for the sake of time, won't be able to go into it. But yes, we do have resources, and we use two programs, one called Making a Difference and Making Proud Choices. Those are pretty inclusive. We've done some adaptations, and they also have some great examples of using gender neutral conversations around sexual health. So those are two really good curriculums. So if you follow up with us, Brianna will be able to talk to you about that. And we also have, speaking of PFLAG, by the way, in books, the PFLAG Hinsdale donated a bunch of books to our LGBTQ Center's Rainbow Room. So we have books that people can come and borrow from us.
Awesome.
And we're just about at our 5-minute mark.
Okay, so then let me talk about the Family Acceptance Project. So here's the thing, the Family Acceptance Project, and I couldn't get the copyright on there, but this is a copywritten thing. And there's the link at the bottom of this page. But we know that if a family or a family unit, the more accepting you are of your LGBTQ plus child or family member, it reduces their risk and it promotes well-being. So the more accepting you are, the better they are in terms of their health. They have higher self-esteem. They have stronger social support because, like, Bob said, they have friends who come over and you're like, let me make you a sandwich. I need that to go on a bumper sticker, by the way. They have better family relationships. They're less likely to be depressed. Forgot to add the ED. They're 3 times less likely to attempt suicide as well as think about suicide, and they're less likely to use substances. So all of that can be found on the familyproject.sfsu.edu page. And then I have some additional, there we go. Wait, did I skip ahead? Yes, no. All right, I'm just so bad at this.
You're great.
And the other additional resources. So our LGBTQ Center resource, you can find our link on the Kenneth Young Center's webpage, and then the Penta Pride Project, there's their website. The P Flag, perhaps that's the old phrase, I'm not sure, but Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And then the link for the Family Acceptance Project. Again, there are a lot of other resources out there. HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, they also have on their website, they have specific tools and whatnot. The Fenway Project is another resource, but we try to keep it short and small because we're really talking to parents, guardians, grandparents, aunts, uncles, other relatives, chosen family members on how to support your LGBTQ family members. So we wanted to keep these resources specific to researchy folks. And as I said on the last webinar that I did, the 101 one from earlier this morning, the other, just a small tip, if you like to geek out on resources like I do, when you go to these websites, look at their resource page. So if you find a great website, click on their resources and you can just deep dive into some additional stuff.
Something really important for me was having a GSA at my school or being in theater or my show choir. And I think that letting your kids be part of those things is really important. And having support in those is really good. Having a supportive family for extracurriculars is really good because those were always my safe spaces. And parents letting you do those things is really good because that might be your kid's safe space if you don't go to therapy like I didn't. So just allowing your kid to do the extracurriculars they want to do is just really good because they might not have a safe space, and that just might be their coping mechanism. And so allowing them to do the extracurriculars they want to do is just really good and supportive, and that might create a better bond between you and your kid because that will show that you trust them more as well. And I don't know, that made me and my mom closer as well. And yeah.
It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. So we're just at the mark. We do have one more question that I think is really, really important. So quickly, Andy, while you're still here, are there any role models that you look up to in the community?
Oh Lord. I really, really look up to David Bowie.
Okay.
Because he was the first androgynous rock person. I really like rock music, and he's androgynous, which just really means a lot to me. And he's just such a queen. And Ellen DeGeneres, obviously.
Good one.
And I really look up to my choreographer in show choir because he's just, I want to say a curse word, he's such a bad bee because he doesn't let anything get in the way, and he just like goes through everyday life and like doesn't let anything get like in front of him and just conquers the world every second of the day. And I want that in life.
Awesome. I would add one thing to what you just said, Andy. I think it's so important for schools to accept and highlight and uphold when they have gay staff and LGBTQ staff. Children need to see themselves reflected in adults. What better thing? We need to hire gay people and trans people, and they have to be out and open, because that's someone for these kids to, oh, so-and-so is part of this community, then it's great that I am too. So.
That's great. In fact, you can even ask, parents can ask school administration, oh, by the way, do you have any staff that are part of the LGBTQ community? I'd love to connect with them,
That's
so
awesome.
That's a great thing to say.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Bob and Carolyn and Andy, for your participation. Yes, so we will, in the closing plenary, we'll talk about evaluations. And so thank you all for participating. Thanks for your comments. Continue to be open, continue to learn, being open to learning, that is, and check out the resources. And we'll see you all in the closing.